I was standing at the kitchen counter when my phone buzzed, and I almost didn't look at it. I was in the middle of packing a cooler, some leftover soup, a block of cheese, a bottle of white wine I'd been saving, because I was heading up to the cottage for the long weekend, and I was already 20 minutes behind schedule. The text was from my daughter-in-law. Just wanted to confirm. We told everyone you're doing Christmas dinner this year. The whole family, both sides, probably around 40 people. We figured your place makes the most sense since it's the biggest. We're so excited! I read it twice. Then I set my phone face down on the counter, picked up the cooler, carried it out to my car, came back inside, put on my coat, picked up my keys, and sat down at the kitchen table. I sat there for a good 4 minutes without moving. 40 people, both sides. Christmas dinner. We figured your place makes the most sense. She hadn't asked. My son hadn't called. There was no would you mind, or if it's not too much trouble, or even what do you think? There was just a text from my daughter-in-law at 11:30 on a Friday morning, telling me what I was going to do for Christmas. I picked up my phone and I typed, "I don't think I'm the right person for that this year. I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas." Then I put the phone in my coat pocket, locked the house, and drove north. I want to tell you something about the woman who got into that car, because I think it matters. My name is Harriet, and I turned 63 in September. I was a school librarian for 31 years at a public school in Waterloo, Ontario. I raised 2 children in the house I still live in. The house my husband Roland and I bought in 1989 for $112,000, which felt like an impossible amount of money at the time, and which would not buy you a storage unit in that neighborhood today. Roland died 7 years ago. Cancer. It was fast, too fast to feel like we'd had enough warning, slow enough that we knew exactly how it was going to end. He was 61. I was 56. I remember thinking the day of his funeral that I had no idea who I was going to be without him. It took a while, but I figured it out. After I retired, I turned the basement into a proper rec room, repainted the upstairs, and started taking the cottage more seriously. Roland's parents had left it to him, and then it came to me, and for the first few years after he died I could barely stand to go there. Too many summers, too many versions of us that didn't exist anymore. But I started going, first just for a night, then for weekends, then for whole weeks in September when the bugs were gone and the lake was still and the birches had gone yellow. I brought books. I learned to kayak at the age of 58, which my daughter thought was slightly insane and which made me happier than I had been in years. The house in Waterloo is paid off. I own it outright. Roland and I finished the mortgage in 2014, and since then the property has done what property in southern Ontario does, which is appreciate at a pace that makes your head spin. I don't say this to brag. I say it because it becomes relevant. My son. I'll call him my son because that's what he is, and I'm not interested in using his name here. Moved into the Waterloo house with his wife 4 years ago. This is not what I would have chosen, but here is how it happened. They'd been renting a condo in Kitchener, and his wife was pregnant with their second child, and they said they needed more space, and they were trying to save for a down payment, and the market was impossible, and they just needed a few months, maybe 6, just to get their feet under them. My son sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I would later sit and read that text, and he looked genuinely stressed, and he is my son, and I said yes. I moved into the cottage full-time, which I had been thinking about doing anyway. I told them they could stay until they found something, that I didn't need rent, that I just needed them to cover the utilities and keep the place in reasonable order. That was 4 years ago. In 4 years, they have not moved out. In 4 years, the down payment they were supposedly saving has not materialized, or if it has, I have not heard about it. My son drives a truck that costs more per month than I spent on groceries for a year when he was in high school. His wife had her nails done every 3 weeks. I know this because she mentioned it in passing once, cheerfully, not as a confession. They have 2 beautiful children who I adore, and they live in my house. I want to be clear, I don't resent the children. I love those children fiercely. I see them less than I would like, but that's a different matter. What I resent, and I am using that word carefully, because I have spent a lot of time being careful about it, is the gradual way the house stopped feeling like mine. It happened slowly. The guest room became a playroom, and then the toys started appearing in the hallway, and then in the living room. My bookshelves, 3 tall IKEA shelves full of books I had accumulated over 30 years, were moved into the basement to make space for a sectional sofa they bought from Wayfair. Not moved with my knowledge. Moved while I was at the cottage one September and discovered when I came back for a night to pick up some things I'd left behind. I didn't say anything. That's the part I'm not proud of. I should have said something. My daughter-in-law is not a bad person. I want to say that too, and I mean it. She is energetic and well-meaning and loves her kids and works hard at her job. She also has a talent I've observed in certain people for simply not noticing when something she's done might have been inconvenient for someone else. It is not malice. It is a very thorough kind of self-absorption that she has probably never had occasion to examine. My son is gentler than she is, and I think in his heart he knows when something is off. But he has spent 8 years learning not to say so. This is its own kind of damage, but it's not one I can fix for him. The Christmas text was from her. She signed it with a little holiday tree emoji. I drove to the cottage, and I did not check my phone until I got there. There were 11 messages waiting for me by the time I parked. 3 were from my son, each one slightly more escalated than the last. The first said, "Hey Mom, just saw your text. Can you call me?" The second said, "Mom, I think there's been a misunderstanding." The third said, "This is really important. Please call when you get a chance." 2 were from my daughter-in-law. The first was cheerful and slightly confused. "Oh no, I hope I didn't catch you at a bad time. We definitely want to talk through the details with you. There's no pressure on anything specific." The second came 40 minutes later, and the tone had shifted. "I'm a little surprised by your response, to be honest. We thought you'd be excited. The kids would love it." The remaining 6 were from my sister-in-law, Roland's younger sister, who has been a complicated presence in my life since before Roland and I got married and has not become less complicated since he died. She lives in Hamilton, and she considers herself the informal record keeper of family events, which means she is usually the first to know when something is being planned and the first to let everyone else know her feelings about it. Her messages escalated faster than anyone else's. The first, "Harriet, I'm hearing Christmas is at your place this year. How wonderful." The second, 20 minutes later, "I was thinking I could bring my husband's mother this year. She doesn't get out much and your house has such good accessibility." The third, "I'm assuming you'll do a full turkey dinner? My son has a nut allergy, as you know, and my daughter is doing gluten-free right now." The fourth, "I haven't heard back. Are you okay? Just wanted to confirm the date." The fifth, "Harriet, I just spoke to your son, and he says there may be some confusion. I hope everything is all right." The sixth, "This is very unlike you. I'm a little worried." I put the phone on the windowsill and watched a pair of mergansers make their way across the bay. Then I made tea, and I sat down and I thought very carefully about what I actually wanted to do. Here is what I knew. I knew that I had not agreed to host Christmas. I knew that my daughter-in-law had announced it to somewhere between 30 and 40 people, both sides of the family, she'd said, before mentioning it to me. I knew that my son had let it happen and then waited for her to communicate it to me, which told me everything I needed to know about how decisions were made in that household. I also knew some things that they did not know I knew. About 2 years ago, I had a long conversation with my financial advisor and separately with a lawyer about the house. The conversations were prompted by something small, a comment my son made in passing about eventually, that left me with a feeling I couldn't quite name and didn't like. The feeling turned out to be the right one to have. I put the Waterloo house into a trust. The trust is set up so that the house will go to my grandchildren, both of them, in equal shares, when they reach adulthood, with conditions I had carefully discussed with the lawyer and which I am comfortable with. The trust is managed by my lawyer and my daughter, who lives in Victoria and who I trust completely. Neither my son nor my daughter-in-law is listed as a beneficiary. I had not told them this. There had not seemed to be a right moment, and if I'm honest, I knew the moment would be unpleasant, and I had been avoiding unpleasant moments for most of the 4 years they had lived in my house. That ends, I thought, looking out at the bay. Not because of the Christmas text. Or not only because of it, but because the Christmas text had made very clear to me what I'd been telling myself for years wasn't the case, that things would naturally, gradually improve, that they would save enough money and find a place and move out on their own timeline, that I didn't need to make anything uncomfortable because discomfort would resolve itself. It doesn't resolve itself. I know this. I taught it to 2 children. And here I was, 63 years old, a retired librarian with a paid-off house and a kayak and a perfectly good bottle of white wine, telling myself the same story I'd been telling since 2020. I called my son on Saturday morning. I'd spent the evening thinking about what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it, and I'd gotten about 4 hours of sleep, and I felt, by the time I picked up the phone, like I was standing on very solid ground. He answered on the second ring. "Mom, finally. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "I'm at the cottage. I want to talk with you about a few things." "Okay." A pause. I wanted to explain about the Christmas thing. She got excited and jumped ahead. "I know that, and I'm sorry it came as a surprise. She told 40 people before us asking me." "I know." Another pause, longer this time. "I know. That was too much." "It was," I said, "and I want to talk about that. But I also want to talk about some bigger things, and I'd like you to listen before we get into Christmas specifically, because Christmas is actually the smaller issue." I heard him settle. That particular quality of silence, that means someone is stealing themselves. "We need to talk about the house," I said. The conversation lasted almost an hour. I told him what I should have told him in year 1, which was that staying indefinitely was not the plan. That I had been patient, and I was glad the arrangement had given them some breathing room. But that breathing room had a limit, and 4 years was past it. I told him that I understood the housing market in Waterloo region was genuinely brutal and had been for years, and that I had some sympathy for that. But I also noted that in 4 years, at no point had they asked to renegotiate the arrangement, asked whether I needed anything, or mentioned a specific timeline for moving out. I told him that I had done some things with the house from an estate planning perspective that he should know about. When I said that, there was a silence. "What kind of things?" he said. "I put it into a trust," I said. 2 years ago. The beneficiaries are your kids." More silence. "Mom, I made this decision because it's my house and it's my decision to make," I said. "And I made it with good legal counsel and a clear head. I'm not telling you to upset you. I'm telling you because you should know. We thought." He stopped. "We assumed that eventually." "I know what you assumed," I said quietly, "and I understand why. I should have been clearer much sooner about what my intentions were. That's on me. But I want you to hear me clearly now. The house is not going to pass to you and your wife. It's going to your children, and it's going to be managed in a way that protects their futures. That was my choice to make, and I've made it." He was very quiet for a while. "I need to talk to her," he said finally. "I know," I said. "That's okay. Take whatever time you need. But I want to give you a timeline because that's what I should have done 4 years ago. I'd like you to have a plan in place by the end of March, not moved out necessarily. A plan. Something real and specific that we can both look at. Can you do that?" Another silence. Then, "Yeah, okay, yeah, thank you," I said. "What about Christmas?" he said, and his voice was flat. "Christmas," I said, "is not at my house this year. It's not that I don't want to see everyone. I'll come into town. I'll bring the kids presents, and I'll stay for dinner if someone else is hosting it. But I'm not cooking a turkey for 40 people. I'm 63, and I've earned the right to have a quiet Christmas if I want one." He didn't argue with that. I think he knew he couldn't. After we hung up, I called my sister-in-law. This was the part I'd been dreading more than the conversation with my son, which tells you something about the respective complexity of those relationships. She answered with a particular brightness that means she's waiting and has prepared something to say. "Harriet!" "I'm so glad you called. I've been worried." "You don't need to worry," I said. "I'm fine. I'm at the cottage." Yes, your son mentioned. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but I do think. I know you don't want to get in the middle, I said. And I appreciate that. I'm calling to let you know that Christmas dinner as announced isn't happening. It was announced without my knowledge or agreement, and I've spoken to my son about it. Silence. Oh, she said. I know that might be inconvenient for plans people have made. I'm sorry for that. But I want to be straightforward with you, rather than let this go on longer. I see. She was recalibrating. I could feel it. Well, I suppose I assumed since your son said. He was working from the same correct information, I said. That's been sorted out now. And the family gathering? There won't be. Someone else is welcome to host it, I said. I'll absolutely come. I'm happy to bring something. But I'm not hosting 40 people. There was a pause, and then she said, in the gentler voice she uses when she's decided to be gracious. I think I understand, and I respect that, Harriet. I do. I thanked her and said goodbye. I sat with the phone in my lap and looked out at the lake. There was a light wind now, and the water had that gray-green look it gets in November, deep and cold and very quiet. I thought about Roland. I thought about how he used to make coffee too strong every single morning for 30 years, and how I never once told him. I thought it was too strong, because I knew it would make him self-conscious, and somehow it felt like the kindest thing to just let it be. I wondered sometimes if that was love, or if it was just conflict avoidance dressed up in gentler clothes. The difference matters. I think knowing the difference might be the project of a whole lifetime. What happened after that happened slowly, the way real things do. My son and daughter-in-law asked for a meeting in January at the house, in person. My daughter flew in from Victoria because I had called her in November and told her everything. The trust, the timeline, the Christmas text, and she had said, "Mom, I'm proud of you," in a voice that made me cry a little, which I don't often do. She came partly for support, and partly because as co-trustee, she had a legitimate reason to be there, and partly, I think, because she loves her brother and she wanted to keep things from going sideways. It was a long afternoon. My daughter-in-law cried. My son was mostly quiet in the way he is when he is embarrassed about something and doesn't have the language for it yet. There were some hard moments. She said at one point that she felt blindsided by the trust, and I said, gently but clearly, that I understood that feeling, and also that the house was mine and that the decision was mine to make. She didn't have an answer for that, because there wasn't one. By the end of the afternoon, they had agreed to a move-out timeline. End of April. That gave them 5 months to find something. My daughter suggested we formalize it with a letter, just a simple written record of the agreement, and they agreed to that too. I did not make the letter punitive. I did not list grievances or attach conditions. I just stated the date and the expectation, and my lawyer drafted it, and everyone signed it. They moved out on the 28th of April. I wasn't there. I was at the cottage because the ice had gone off the lake early that year, and there were loons calling, and I had been waiting all winter for exactly that sound. My son called me that evening. He said the move had gone fine. He said the new place was smaller than they wanted, but it was theirs. He said the kids had been excited about having their own rooms. That's good, I said. That's really good. There was a pause, and then he said, I think I've been, not great, Mom, for a while. I said, I know. He said, I'm sorry about Christmas. I said, I know that too. It wasn't a reconciliation in the movie sense. There was no big speech, no dramatic turn. He's my son. I love him the way you love someone you made and raised and watched, become a person who is both yours and completely not yours, and the love doesn't stop when they disappoint you. It just gets more complicated, which is different from getting less real. I went back to the house in May to check it over, to see what needed doing. They had left it in reasonable order, better than I'd expected, though the baseboards in the playroom needed repainting and there were some deep scratches on the kitchen floor that I didn't ask about. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, and I thought about the years we'd had in that room. The birthday cakes, the arguments over homework, the holiday mornings before Roland got sick when we would make too much food and eat it slowly in our pajamas. I thought about the years after, the ones I'd had to navigate alone, and the ones I'd spent telling myself that keeping the peace was the same as keeping things good. It isn't. I know that now. Keeping the peace is something you do when you're afraid of what comes after the noise. What comes after the noise, I have found, is usually just ordinary life. A little cleaner. A little more honest. My grandchildren were here last month, both of them, for a whole weekend. I drove them up to the cottage. We kayaked on Saturday morning, both of them with their little life jackets on, and my granddaughter caught a small bass and held it up with both hands like she'd discovered treasure, and I thought, this is what I was protecting. Not the house. Not the money. Not even the trust. Exactly, though I'm glad those documents exist, and I'm glad I made them when I did. I was protecting the story I wanted them to have. The version of their grandmother who was generous but not a doormat, who loved them plainly and without conditions, who was 63 years old and had a kayak and a cottage on a lake and had earned, fully and without apology, the right to a quiet Christmas. My granddaughter asked me on the drive home if I was coming for her birthday in July. She said, "Can we have a cake with strawberries? Grandma makes the best strawberry cake." I said yes. I said absolutely yes. Some things you hold on to.